Think about the last time someone let you down. Maybe a friend who talked behind your back, a colleague who took credit for your work, someone who seemed trustworthy, right up until they weren't. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The warning signs were probably there the whole time. You just weren't looking in the right places. Most people believe that life gets better when you become smarter, more confident, or more successful. And those things matter, don't get me wrong. But the single biggest advantage you can develop is one that almost nobody talks about. It is the ability to see clearly what others are too distracted, too emotional, or too naive to notice. Today we are going to walk through 10 lessons pulled from Machiavelli's study of human nature, lessons that don't require you to be paranoid, cold, or suspicious of everyone you meet. They just require you to stop being naive, and there is a very big difference between the two. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Stop trusting words too quickly. Let's start with the most basic trap that almost everyone falls into at least once. We trust what people say way too quickly. And look, it makes sense why we do it. Language is how we connect. When someone tells you they care about you, that they've got your back, that you can count on them, it feels real. The problem is that words are the easiest thing in the world to fake. Anyone can sound honest. Anyone can sound loyal. Anyone can sound like they genuinely care, especially when there's no pressure on them to prove it. Think about it. It costs absolutely nothing to say, "I'll always be there for you." Zero effort. But it costs everything to actually show up when life gets hard. That's the gap right there between words and behavior. And that gap is where the truth lives. The Machiavellian approach here isn't cynicism, it's pattern recognition. You're not listening to what someone says once. You're watching what someone does consistently, over time, across different situations, especially when there's nothing to be gained from doing the right thing. That's when you see the real person. Here's a simple test you can use immediately. Watch how someone treats people who can offer them absolutely nothing in return. A waiter, a cashier, a stranger who needs directions, someone below them in any kind of hierarchy. Because the truth is that people are often on their best behavior when they want something from you. But around people who can't help them, the mask starts to slip. Real character lives in repeated behavior, not in grand speeches. And here's something that connects to this directly. Most people believe they can spot a liar by looking at their face. Research suggests that's mostly wrong. But there's another signal that's far more reliable, and we'll get to it in Lesson 4. Lesson 2. Look for hidden motives. Everyone has a reason for doing what they do. And rarely, almost never, do people reveal that reason completely up front. Now again, this doesn't mean everyone around you has sinister intentions. Most of the time, the hidden motive is completely ordinary. People want approval, they want attention, they want to feel powerful, they want something, a favor, a connection, a feeling of importance. That's just human nature. And there's nothing wrong with it unless you're completely unaware that it's operating in every interaction you have. The trap most people fall into is this. They see someone being kind, and they automatically translate that into, "This person is a good person who genuinely cares about me." Maybe they are. But kindness and self-interest are not mutually exclusive. Someone can be kind to you precisely because it benefits them to be kind to you. The question you need to get in the habit of asking is not, are they being nice? The question is, why are they being nice right now? One of the best signals to watch for is sudden changes in behavior. If someone who barely acknowledged you before suddenly becomes your biggest supporter after you get a promotion, pay attention to that timing. It's not proof of manipulation, but it's worth noticing. Real loyalty tends to be consistent. It doesn't spike and drop based on your social status or what you can currently offer. There's another behavior worth watching closely. Notice how people treat those they consider to be above them versus those they consider to be below them. If someone is completely different depending on the status of the person they're talking to, respectful to the boss, dismissive to the intern, that inconsistency is telling you something important about who they actually are. Lesson 3. Control your emotions before you judge anyone. Here is something I want you to take seriously, because this one trips up even smart, self-aware people. Your emotions are not a reliable compass for reading reality. When you're angry, the world looks threatening. When you're desperate, opportunities look amazing that aren't. When you're lonely, the wrong person can seem exactly right. Emotions don't just affect your mood, they actively distort your perception. And the problem is that you often don't realize it's happening while it's happening. Manipulative people, whether consciously or not, often target people in emotional states. Why? Because when you're emotional, your behavior becomes predictable. You react instead of respond. You defend illusions instead of seeing clearly. A skilled manipulator can push your emotional buttons and know exactly how you'll behave next. The Machiavellian prescription here is simple but requires real discipline. Before you judge a person, before you make a big decision based on something someone said or did, pause, step back, let the first wave of emotion settle. Not because the emotion is wrong or invalid, but because you deserve to see the situation for what it actually is, not what it feels like when you're in the middle of it. There's a phrase I keep coming back to on this: temporary feelings should never dictate permanent decisions. This applies to relationships, business, friendships, all of it. He who controls his emotions controls his perception, and he who controls his perception is nearly impossible to manipulate. Lesson 4. Notice small warning signs early. Now let's talk about something that can literally save you years of dealing with the wrong person in your life. Major betrayals, the ones that genuinely blindside you, the ones that feel like the ground dropped out from under your feet, those almost never come from nowhere. They start small. A tiny lie that seems harmless, a moment of disrespect that you brush off, a time when someone tested a boundary and you let it go because it seemed minor. That's not an accident. That's how manipulation begins, testing your tolerance quietly to see exactly how much you'll accept before you push back. Here's what Machiavelli understood deeply. The time to solve a problem is when it's small, not when it's exploded into something you can't ignore. By then you've already normalized a dynamic that shouldn't exist. You've trained the other person unconsciously to know that they can cross lines with you and face no real consequence. The signal you want to watch for is this: pay attention to how someone reacts when they don't get their way. Do they become passive-aggressive? Do they guilt-trip you? Do they get petty or cold? Or can they genuinely accept a no and move on like an adult? That reaction is one of the most honest things you'll ever see from a person, because in that moment, there's nothing to perform. The mask is off. And trust your gut more. Not every time, but when something consistently feels off, when you keep making mental excuses for someone's behavior, when you keep reassuring yourself that it's fine, take that feeling seriously. Your subconscious is often picking up on patterns that your conscious mind is choosing to explain away. Lesson 5. Listen more than you talk. This one is simple, almost embarrassingly simple, but the number of people who actually practice it is remarkably small. Silence is one of the most underrated strategic tools in human interaction. Think about what happens when you talk. You give people information about yourself, your plans, your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, what you want. You reveal yourself. Every word you add is a piece of data that someone else can use to understand you, predict you, or eventually, if they're not on your side, work against you. Now flip it. When you listen, really listen, without rushing to fill every pause, the other person fills the silence. And people will tell you almost everything about themselves if you just give them enough time and space to do it. Their insecurities come out, their bitterness, their real opinions, their true intentions. They can't help it. Most people are desperate to be understood, and given room to talk, they will. There's something else worth noting here. Insecure people talk constantly. They need to fill the room because silence feels threatening to them, like they might not matter if they're not speaking. Genuinely confident people are comfortable in silence. They observe, they gather information, and when they do speak, it lands with weight, because it's not competing with noise. The practical shift is this: in your next meaningful conversation, resist the urge to immediately reply after someone finishes talking. Pause, even just 2 or 3 seconds. Watch what happens. More often than not, they'll keep going, and what they say next is usually more honest than what they said first. If you've been watching so far, you've already got 5 tools that most people never think about, but we're about to go deeper. The next 5 lessons are the ones that separate people who are merely aware from people who are genuinely impossible to fool. Let's keep going. Lesson 6. Watch people under pressure. You have probably heard the saying, you don't really know someone until you've seen them under pressure. And most people nod along at that, and then forget about it entirely. But let's actually unpack what it means. When life is easy, when things are going well, when there's no real stress, no real obstacle, almost anyone can be kind. Almost anyone can be patient. Almost anyone can be generous. It costs nothing because there's nothing to lose. But the moment things get hard, stress strips away every carefully maintained social layer and shows you what's actually underneath. Watch how people handle conflict. Watch them during delays, when the plan changes and they didn't expect it. Watch them after a setback, a lost deal, a failed project, a difficult piece of feedback. Does this person become cruel? Do they lash out, blame others, and refuse to take any responsibility? Or do they become steady? Do they look for solutions? Do they protect the people around them even when they're hurting? The character you see in those moments is the real character. The rest is just performance. And here's something worth turning inward for a second. Notice how you behave under pressure. Not to beat yourself up about it, but to understand yourself clearly. Your reactions under stress are also data about your own emotional maturity. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Lesson 7. Pay attention to envy. This is one of the most uncomfortable lessons in this entire video, because it involves people you might genuinely care about. Not enemies, not strangers, friends, family, co-workers, people who have known you for years. Envy is one of the most carefully hidden emotions in human experience, because admitting to it, even to yourself, feels terrible. Nobody wants to be the person who resents someone else's success, so instead they find other outlets. Passive-aggressive jokes that go just a little too far, changing the subject when you share good news, competing in ways that feel slightly off, unnecessary criticism that's framed as just being honest. Here's the uncomfortable truth. As you grow, as you become more successful, more clear-headed, more confident, the social dynamics around you change. Some people will celebrate that genuinely. Others won't, even if they thought they would. And a few will quietly resent you for it. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your progress reminds them of something they feel they're lacking. The Machiavellian response to this is not paranoia and not withdrawal. It's heightened observation combined with genuine humility. Stay grounded. Don't perform your success unnecessarily. But also don't stay blind to what's actually happening around you. The person who is first to congratulate you, but the most enthusiastic about your failures. Notice that pattern. Lesson 8. Stop needing everyone's approval. Here's a vulnerability that almost everyone has to some degree, and that manipulative people learn to identify very quickly. The need to be liked. When you need everyone's approval, when rejection feels genuinely unbearable, you make yourself manipulable. Not because you're weak, but because the people around you learn, consciously or not, that they can leverage your fear of their disapproval to get what they want from you. They can make you feel guilty for saying no. They can make you feel like you're being difficult when you hold a boundary. They can withhold their warmth strategically and watch you scramble to earn it back. And you keep playing that game. Because being liked feels safer than being respected. Here's the shift. Stop optimizing for being liked and start optimizing for being real. A person with clear boundaries and genuine honesty will occasionally upset people, especially people who were benefiting from the fact that you had no boundaries before. That's not a problem. That's a signal that you're moving in the right direction. The phrase I want you to hold on to is this: quiet independence, the ability to say no without guilt, the ability to disappoint someone without spiraling into anxiety, the ability to hold your position even when someone is clearly unhappy about it. That quiet independence is one of the most powerful forms of confidence that exists, and it is completely unteachable until you decide to actually practice it. Lesson 9. Judge priorities through actions, not words. We're almost at the final lesson, and this one connects directly back to where we started. Because everything comes down to this: people show you what they value through their daily choices, not through what they say about themselves. Here's how this plays out. Someone tells you that family is the most important thing in their life. But when you look at how they actually spend their time, their energy, their emotional investment, family barely registers. Someone tells you they care about your friendship, but every time things get inconvenient, you're the one who makes accommodations, and they're the one who finds reasons not to show up. Someone has a powerful vision for their future, and you've never once seen them take a concrete step toward it. None of this requires moral judgment. People can say things and genuinely mean them in the moment. They can have values they aspire to and still fail to live by them. That's human. But the gap between what someone says they value and what their behavior actually reflects, that gap is important information. It tells you who this person actually is right now, as opposed to who they would like to be. This lesson also applies inward, and that's the harder direction to look. Where are you spending your actual time and energy? What does that reveal about what you actually value? Not what you think you value, not what you tell yourself you value, but what your life demonstrates you value. The person who is honest enough to ask themselves that question and sit with the answer is already thinking more clearly than most. Lesson 10. Train yourself to observe everything. The last lesson is also the most fundamental one, because every single lesson we've talked about today depends on it. Most people move through life half awake. They're reacting to whatever is loudest, most obvious, most immediately in their face. They're not actually observing. They're processing the surface layer and assuming that's the full picture. And then they're blindsided again and again by things that were, in retrospect, completely visible the whole time. Awareness is not a personality trait you either have or don't have. It is a skill. It is a practice. And it starts with one very deliberate habit: slow down mentally. Before you react to someone, pause. Before you accept your first impression of a situation, look again. Before you fill in the blanks with what you hope is true, check whether the evidence actually supports it. Start noticing the small things that most people dismiss entirely. The pause before someone answers a question that should have been simple. The slight change in their vocal tone when a certain subject comes up. The shift in the energy of a room when a particular person enters. A smile that doesn't quite reach someone's eyes. Body language that contradicts the confident words. These things are not invisible. They're just below the level of awareness that most people operate at. And most importantly, do not rush to conclusions. Observation is not about making snap judgments faster. It is about connecting dots over time. One data point doesn't tell you much, but 10 observations of the same pattern across different situations over weeks or months, that tells you something real. The person who observes more understands more. And the person who understands more moves through the world with a kind of clarity and control that most people will never experience. Here is the core idea I want to leave you with. This philosophy, this Machiavellian approach to human nature, isn't about fear. It's not about doubting everyone or living with your guard up permanently. It's about living without filters. Most of the bad decisions people make in life aren't caused by low intelligence. They're caused by low attention. By moving too fast, by filling in the blanks with what they hope is true, instead of looking at what's actually in front of them. The simple act of slowing down, of choosing to observe more and react less, is more powerful than any strategy or tactic you'll find anywhere. When you apply what we covered today, you will naturally speak less but understand more. You will react less but perceive more. You will trust slower but far, far more wisely. And the relationships you build, the decisions you make, the situations you avoid, all of it gets better. If this resonated with you and you want to go even deeper on understanding people and social dynamics, the next video is going to be exactly what you need. I'll see you there.